So our job here today is to decide how much crime we'll accept in our state.
Or to be more specific, what level of drug crimes are entirely unacceptable in our state. Imagine, if you will, a bill at the Idaho State House that finds the far right and the left standing together. Idaho law outlines mandatory minimum sentences for specific amounts of illegal narcotics. There was a discussion in the House Judiciary Rules and Administration Committee about House Bill 67 today. It's intended to amend that mandatory minimum law by adding fentanyl to a list that already includes marijuana, cocaine, meth, and heroin. The discussion went about 2.5 hours, and it was decided to hold it in committee. The interesting part of this hearing was hearing how conservative Republicans like Representatives Barbara Ehart and Heather Scott on the committee and Democratic lawmakers like Representative John Gannon and Colin Nash lined up on the same side of this. Committee members heard from several members of law enforcement who are in favor of this bill, hoping to get another weapon to fight against drug trafficking. But as Andrew Bartline found out, there could be victims on both sides of this argument.
Once you're tied up in a bad situation.
This was out of the prison a couple of years in.
Amy Lawrence has seen firsthand.
I know she was doing a little because he kind of forced it on her.
How hard it can be to break free.
I've known Jade since she was 8 years old. Her family moved in next door to my house, and Mom would leave and not leave her with food or money to buy food, or the power would be off. This god-awful little place that she got, the ceilings were almost as low as here. It looked like you're in a bunker.
Tied up.
Mom's a partier, big time.
From one bad situation.
She just was with her boyfriend and her boyfriend's dad, who was selling.
On to the next.
Heroin.
The apartment had enough heroin to charge and convict Jade of drug trafficking without any proof of intent to sell. Under the same Idaho law, a judge was forced to sentence Jade to a mandatory minimum of 10 years in prison.
She's never had any legal issues before, no law problems with the law. There should be a case-by-case basis, definitely.
It's a sentiment shared among some lawmakers.
Which takes the power away from judges to impose sentences and gives that power to prosecutors.
Including Representative Colin Nash.
That's why we have judges there, and we should empower them to use their discretion on a case-by-case basis.
But in this case today, House Bill 67 aims to retie the knot, specifically by loosening the tie on heroin's mandatory minimum penalties, but most notably, by adding fentanyl to the list of qualifying substances.
We take the fentanyl crisis seriously, but we need to not jump to throwing people in prisons for decades and decades when the punishment might not fit the crime.
But it's the punishment's message.
Deterring people from trafficking fentanyl.
That's garnered support from law enforcement in committee testimony.
We're looking at people who have trafficking amounts of weight and are killing our family members in this state.
The bill's language, however, does not require the state to quantify the exact amount of the illegal substance. This means 5 ounces of fentanyl and a pound of baking soda is criminalized as a full pound of illegal drugs in Idaho, which can quickly classify a personal use of drugs to a trafficking amount and be subject to a mandatory minimum.
Until we actually address that in state law, we'll be continually penalizing people without that parity in law.
Laws that tighten the knots to hold down Jade.
Even a couple of the officers out there says, I don't know why she's still here. She's not a problem. She's never been a problem.
Now, halfway through a 10-year sentence.
She's going to have a hard time getting back into society if she's doing 10 years because she doesn't know what's going on. So much has changed since she went in.
To be more specific about that mandatory minimum, 7 or more grams is what's needed to qualify, and that's what would change for heroin if this were to become law and if it added fentanyl. So 7 grams of pure fentanyl, law enforcement in testimony today said that's equivalent to 2,500 doses, or 3,500 doses, I should say. They say there are 500 doses in 1 gram of pure fentanyl. And the bill has brackets for mandatory minimum sentences, Brian. So 3 years. There are 3 years, 5 years, and 10 years. That's how it works out, those 3 different tiers. The lowest tier would be 7 grams. They're changing that because it used to be 2 grams for heroin. They're looking to up it. So loosening the reins on heroin a little bit, but then adding fentanyl to it as well. So it does 2 different things.
That's what I was going to ask. There's a lot of information, a lot of numbers you just threw at us, but to simplify this as best you can, we're loosening, we're tightening, we're adding. What is this? What exactly does this do?
Pretty much. So what is qualified for a mandatory minimum on heroin? It is loosening slightly
Okay.
and adding fentanyl to the list of drugs that qualify for a mandatory minimum sentence. Law enforcement say it's a deterrent and they like it. People who oppose it say that it's a little bit more nuanced than that because Idaho doesn't separate out mixtures. If you had a Coca-Cola bottle that had a pill of fentanyl in it, that whole substance of Coca-Cola is going to be considered fentanyl.
That's the weight.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, we do know that this bill has been held. It needs some work, so it really is not doing much right now, but we'll wait and see if it gets brought back. All right. Thank you very much, Andrew.